Welcome, everybody, to Aeon Byte, and I hope you enjoyed that intro. Certainly, we will be discussing Chapel Perilous, and as I was mentioning, this is the part from Stephen King's Carrie, where the protagonist goes through Chapel Perilous and doesn't do a very good job. Obviously, the lead singer of Blind Melon did not do a very good job. He couldn't get out or overcome his demons, and that band's career was cut short. But then again, in the 90s, these grunge bands, I think Eddie Vedder's the only one who survived of all these guys that came out in the 90s. So Chapel Perilous and How We Get Out. But good to see everybody. This is a special show. It is behind the paywall for subs first. You are getting the complete show, whether it's audio or video, and you get it early, and you will also get a bonus. So a gift for those of you who support Aeon Byte, and please support this Red Pill Cafeteria in any way you can. Subscribe for all these other cool bonuses and treats. And today is certainly a treat, as we are doing Robert Anton Wilson, The Gnosis of Ra, Part 2. And it is an honor to have again Gabriel Kennedy to discuss his book, Chapel Perilous, The Life and Thought Crimes of Robert Anton Wilson. Gabriel, thanks for coming back. Good to see you.
Hey, Miguel. Great to see you, man. Vance, how are you as well? It's great to be here, guys.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know, but Sissy Spacek was very good friends with David Lynch.
I did not know that.
Yep, and her husband. Yeah, her husband was in on the Eraserhead originally. Jack, senior moment. I don't remember Jack's last name right now, but he was the man in the planet on Eraserhead.
Oh, interesting. A pity Sissy Spacek I think I would have loved to see her more than Laura Dern in all these movies because I think she's a better actress. She's just an amazing actress. But
She was in the Straight Story, I believe.
mm, the conventional movie Lynch directed.
Yes, very
Very
convinced.
conventional. Awesome. And of course, for those who are in the chat on the tubes, there is no super chat. So if you have a question, Vance would be glad to share with us, and Gabriel will answer it to the best of his abilities. So, well, let's start. It's been a few months, Gabriel. How has your book been received, and how is it going?
Yeah, it's been going very well, Miguel. Yeah, thank you. It's as I said, it's a self-published book, so it's mostly been word of mouth, and maybe people becoming aware of the book through podcasts like yours. So I have to thank you for getting the word out as well. And much like Robert Anton Wilson's work, people are discovering this book through recommendations from other people. So I've been getting some nice sort of mail, I suppose, about it, some nice emails about the book, and that makes me feel good. So it's been going great. Thanks for asking.
Good. Good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, it's a great read, and as we've discussed, it's the only bio of Robert Anton Wilson. It's still very strange that that is even the case, but then again, in 2025, I should learn not to be surprised by anything. It's a reality we live in, and yeah, and you're right. The key is to go on podcasts. It doesn't matter what your book is, self-published, big publisher, little publisher. They all say the same. Go on podcasts, do your Substack, go on social media. That's the new game. The old ways are long and gone. So I'm glad your book is getting some traction, and yeah, keep at it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, just to add to that notion, though, what's his Orson Welles once said about his old friend Ernest Hemingway after Hemingway died that for about 15 years people completely forgot about Hemingway, and that's sort of hard to believe in this current culture. But Wells observed that about some great writers, that there's a period of time when people just forget. But then when it's steam engines when it's steam engine time, as Wilson used to say. So maybe it's time for Wilson, and this is the first book of many.
Yeah, because I want to talk about his ideas and how it can help us navigate today, regardless of where you are. And it is true. I mean, some of my favorite authors, William Blake died almost an unknown. Philip K. Dick didn't really get his wings until after he passed, where he became a global history-changing figure. Even we've done a couple of shows recently, Gabriel, on the Doors, and people forget. Yeah, the Doors had their big surge. Then after Morrison died, they kind of went away, and it was Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now and Oliver Stone's movie that kind of pushed the Doors back into the mainstream consciousness. So it's yeah, the gods kind of decide when it's time for somebody to be noticed. Huh?
Sure. R.I.P. Val Kilmer.
Yes, yes,
Oh
yes.
yeah.
He did a good Jim Morrison. Yeah, he is missed. Talk about an icon, a very big icon. Oof.
Great actor.
So I guess last time I should have started with this question, and since we showed the intro to Carrie and her own struggles, uh, tell the audience what exactly is Chapel Perilous when somebody asks you, what is it? How is it different from the Dark Night of the Soul, or going out to fight the dragon for the treasure, or those other systems of challenge and self-knowledge and underworld exploration?
Yeah, that's interesting to contrast that the Chapel Perilous with the Dark Night of the Soul. It seems that within the Chapel Perilous, more magic can happen just in terms of the metaphors that are utilized. Dark Night of the Soul seems to be something that you just have to endure and hold on to this love of God to get you through, you know. And Chapel Perilous is, first and foremost the name of my book, The Life and Thought Crimes of Robert Anton Wilson. But it's also a term that Wilson sort of, I guess, made famous in his own time, which he borrowed from previous writers like T.S. Eliot and Jesse Weston, who they then borrowed the sort of concept from Arthurian mythos and Arthurian legend, which pretty much in Arthurian mythos, it's a chapel that a brave knight falls into along his path to find the Holy Grail, and within that chapel is great danger, and all the positive signs are inverted. All that he or she once knew as positive is now horribly negative, and it's a place where one could go absolutely batshit crazy, and the brains can melt out of their eyeballs and ooze down their ears as they die a horrible death.
Indiana Jones. Huh?
And Zoot is there, right? Zoot.
Man, they're all the bad guys are there, man. No, I don't know.
Monty Python and Holy Grail reference.
Oh shoot, I missed that.
Zoot.
I know about the killer rabbit in that one. Yeah, so you just brought up so many funny thoughts thinking about that movie, Vance.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean
no, it's all good.
We're trying to be serious here, Vance.
But let's roll with it because I mean, okay, so the way Wilson breaks it down is it's sort of like it's not a physical location, it's a psychological state of mind where one is encountering a lot of wild stuff in one's life, and one has to ask the question, is this a product of some supernatural force or a product of my imagination? When we're walking around in quote unquote everyday life, that sounds like a pretty simple answer. It's your imagination, right? It's not magic, right? But when you enter, certain initiatory paths where that's sort of taken as an axiom that like a magical path, things are magical and charged, etc. Wilson took the path of practicing Crowley's thelemic magic to sort of open the doors to this concept of Chapel Perilous, and then further achieving knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. So Wilson sort of fused two metaphors, right? Like that were kind of big in the 70s. In the paganism movement, they referenced a lot the kind of Knights of the Round Table and things like that. It was a real kind of cultural zeitgeist during that time as well, And then Crowley, I don't know if he references much Arthur. I'm sure he does, but not in the same vein. And Bob sort of fused them together well to, speak about this strange place, the abyss that, that one enters when one is on the magical path, and one must, persevere through the abyss. You must, keep moving through the abyss. But it's also interesting too that, I didn't really put it in the book, but Monty Python was completely on that pulse too with the movie, The Search for the Holy Grail, because is it a footnote? I mean, they included a white killer rabbit in that movie, so they're all, it's an interesting pulse that they were, all these writers were surfing. But yeah, simply put, Chapel Perilous is a very volatile space where the tenuous wall between reality and imagination seems more porous than ever before, and wild things can happen, like a reality TV star can become president twice in America.
Yeah. And then we had a Hollywood actor, so yeah, anything's possible in America. And
Arnold.
Yeah, forget about Arnold.
The last action hero.
Yeah, very Gnostic movie. I love how you brought up Jessie Weston, because her work is very underrated, and how she connects the Arthurian legend to the ancient Greek and Gnostic mysteries. It's just a secret passing of this Gnosis. So love her work. Yeah, like you said, it's all connected, and it's a beautiful thread to follow. Another thing that I've heard people say that Wilson was very prescient was his ideas of the reality tunnel, because it really kind of fits our social media age, where everybody's sort of going here and getting the information they want. Maybe tell the audience, what is a reality tunnel? Do you think it really has been accentuated in our social media algorithmic age?
Yeah, I like the way you phrased the question, Miguel. 100%. I mean, just looking at the phrases, right? Like in today's current era, we fall into echo chambers, right? So
Yeah.
when you shout down a long tunnel, you get an echo, right? So and within our reality tunnels, moving through echo chambers that will, kind of reinforce these reality tunnels, that if we're not aware that we play an active part in constructing every moment of our lives,
Mhm.
um, we will be confirmed in our biased, projection of, reality, by just shouting down our reality, shouting through the reality tunnel and hearing back an echo saying, "You're right. Yes, they suck."
Yeah.
So, yeah, reality tunnel, is, I know, of course, I think Timothy Leary was utilizing the term before
Mm.
Wilson, and then
Yeah.
but Wilson, right? Yeah, and then,
Yes.
but I'm not sure where Leary took that from, but Wilson, of course, sort of integrated what he learned from general semantics, that this linguistic determinism, the words we use determine a reality tunnel to begin with, so he kind
Remember the
of
8
synthesized
stages
that.
that Leary had? He had, 8 stages of consciousness, and the 8th one was, like, tripped out in LSD, of course. But,
Yeah.
I think that was related to the reality tunnels. The higher the consciousness, the more, you could the different reality tunnels you were in.
Right, right. That ability to sort of maybe hold within you two contradicting viewpoints at the same time without feeling the tendency to say one is right and one is wrong, right? That ability to sort of keep, if you have these multiple perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And then exploring that reality tunnel concept, Wilson and Leary, and then this is where they, Leary especially, this coincides with psychology. Christopher Hyatt, the publisher of New Falcon Publications, who published a lot of Wilson and Leary books.
Mhm.
He described Leary's perspective as obviously info psychology, right? Leary called it that too. But if we look at it through information, we have more signals coming at us than we can deal with, and our body and mind, our brain matter constantly, uh, uh, makes the aperture smaller, right? So in order to concentrate to survive on this planet, and evolutionarily where we come from, we weren't the apex predator for thousands of years. We were being chased
Mhm.
by big dino raptors or giant saber-toothed
Yeah.
tigers who would bite our heads off, right? So when we see that cockroach out of the corner of our eye for a second, we get that old, kill it, like, so if we're all taking in all these perspectives all the time and we see the world through a cockroach's eyes, which is a holy thing sometimes, like, how great is that when it's crawling on your face? Like, you do have to kill a cockroach every once in a while, and that sort of holding that balance, I think, is that's the psychology part, right, of being able to maintain different apertures of how to deal with your life. So the first circuit is, food, clothes, and shelter. So
Mhm.
when people are ascetics in a monastery, they have food, clothes, and shelter taken care of already, so they can concentrate on achieving the non-local circuit 8 consciousness connection, if you will, right? And I think Wilson's work is a step in the direction to see how many of these perspectives you can keep open while staying as grounded as possible, because that makes you more intelligent, according to Wilson.
Yeah, well said indeed. Well said. And for again, this is the April 5th show. It's early. And I wanted to say April 5th because I believe today is the day that, speaking of passings, Kurt Cobain died, although I think it wasn't. But, and never mind, I don't want to bring up that conspiracy theory. But yes, a nod to another fallen hero. Uh, but yeah. And the other question I had for you, I think an important question before we start getting a little more nitty gritty, is that I think Wilson's ideas, especially when you move him with Discordianism, could be useful for today and to overcome the propaganda and the sense of powerlessness that I feel people have, the idea of culture jamming and Operation MineF, and I think it fits in our day, and even today, because I'm like, people are marching on the street today all over the country, and I'm like, well, gee, those marches really worked in the 60s. Yeah, we stopped the war. It's like it had to be Nixon in 75 who stopped Vietnam. And so you wonder, well, does marching really help? Does posting on Facebook really help? Calling your senator, either party, they don't listen. I mean, you know what I mean? People feel powerless, and if people feel powerless, they get desperate, they lose hope, they lose their magic, they do extreme things instead of, like we're talking, coming together and at least trying to see if there's an overlap. So, uh, short, yeah, I hope I'm not going in a tangent, but do you agree that maybe Wilson's ideas could be useful today to heal things or at least break down a lot of the illusion that's around us?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I think that his optimism, based in like really like there's a real power in never losing your ability to laugh at life, you
Bingo.
know, like as Monty Python said, life's a piece of shit, so why not laugh at it?
Yeah.
Always look on the bright side of life,
Yeah.
right? Because uh, as far as we know, there's one go around here. No matter what's happening in the world, you have to have a good time, man. Like you have to try to find magic is that, right? Like even I never was that old Roberto Benigni movie. I mean, it's invoking the Holocaust. I'm not trying to
Right,
say
right,
that's where we're
right, right. Yeah,
going,
yeah.
but life is beautiful.
It is.
That being the case, or even like how Viktor Frankl, saw it, that part of finding meaning in life is you have to have joy. So that can't be underestimated. Really, it really can't, because I mean, that's if you move with that, and of course, we're not Buddha, right? Like, so we're going to have the full spectrum of harder emotions, but like, I think though the first thing that yeah, having this capacity to contact your source of joy is a major thing. Uh, uh, Kind of like suggestion of Wilson's. I think a lot of his work is dedicated to that, and that's part of why he's so fun to read. Is he shows you how he got there, you know. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, what did he say about, entering the Chapel Perilous? Everything you fear is waiting for you with slavering jaws in the Chapel Perilous. But if you have, the sword of reason and the pentacle of valor, like, so if don't just be open hearted, but, know what's going on right now. I think it's very important to we have the capacity to watch Senate subcommittee hearings on YouTube while we're eating our breakfast. Like, watch
Right.
that shit, man. Like, who are these representatives? And some of them don't seem too bright. How did they get there? Like, the only way through it is through it. You can't, this is going to require more effort and more intelligence and more from everybody than we that's how Chapel Perilous is, man. And we are certainly in it. Like yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What do you think, Vince? Do you have a question or a comment on the topic?
Well, yeah, I always associated Chapel Perilous with the concept of dweller on the threshold. In other words, it's a huge master initiation where you're about to enter the magical realm, or the realm between just like what um, uh, Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary would say, the first four circuits of consciousness. The earthly ones into the extra earthly ones. And so that's when everything, you start to see symbols everywhere, synchronicities everywhere, and there's definitely a sense of danger, a lot of danger. Well, perilous. And because you could lose your mind, and I think that was the whole one of the big things I remember from Cosmic Trigger, which I read so long ago, was that his sanity, his very sanity, because of the death of his daughter and so forth, was called into question.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about. So in terms of Chapel Perilous, as it coincides with the holy guardian angel, right? Which within Thelema, and then say before that, Golden Dawn, it's kind of seen as the true representative of one's divine nature, right? It's your inner angel. It's the thing. It's that entity that wants nothing but the best for you in your life and everyone around you. That thing that was so easy to tap into when you were a small child, like, oh, I love everybody, and then as life drains along, you're stuck in traffic too long, it turns the other way. But Lon Milo Duquette, who was friends with Wilson, or at least associates, I interviewed him for my book Chapel Perilous, and he's one of the heads of the OTO, or high up in the Ordo Templi Orientis, great magician himself, also a very good writer. He said that so the magician first has to contact their holy guardian angel, and then after that contact, in order to understand like the subtleties and wield its power, the magician is forced to confront important emotional and character defects that, left unresolved, will continue to hinder his or her spiritual evolution. So that's sort of entering Chapel Perilous in a way, and reading Cosmic Trigger and sort of looking at Robert Anton Wilson's life according to this sort of thelemic path. In a sense, that's almost what happened, because Wilson discovers the work of Aleister Crowley in 1970 through the book Eye in the Triangle, written by Israel Regardie, who Regardie was Crowley's secretary at one time, and a member of the Golden Dawn, and a very powerful magician, great writer himself. And Wilson was so inspired by this that he started sort of studying Crowley like immediately, and he even reached out to Regardie like immediately after. Also reached out to Grady McMurtry and his wife Phyllis McMurtry, who were sort of reorganizing the OTO at the time in California. But Bob, he after he goes to work immediately, sort of after reading this book, and there's a kind of Crowleyan curriculum. So Bob buys a tarot deck, and he starts giving like divinations, reading people's tarot cards. He also seeks to these series practices of invocations, and he starts a magical diary and continues writing in his dream diary. So these are all sort of prerequisites to kind of building the ground to get to what Aleister Crowley considered his main mission in life, which was to bring people to their knowledge and conversation of their holy guardian angels. And I always laugh at that irony that like Aleister Crowley, was the great beast, and he's a Satanist, so many people call him, but his whole mission is to bring people to their angels, not their demons, but their angels, And so Bob continues along with this for from 1970 to around 1973. One major thing that he does, like this is really interesting. I got a kick out of this. Like Crowley says, you have to like build up your muscle in a way, your spiritual muscles to, in your visual imagination to invoke your holy guardian angel. So Crowley recommends invoking other deities, and invoking often, as he said, invoke often. So, Bob begins invoking Nut, the Egyptian goddess of the stars, because that's one that Crowley recommends. Mm-hmm. It's interesting where Crowley got this notion from. Wilson says it's sort of like a fusion of bhakti yoga, which is devotional yoga, which you're praying to your the various Hindu gods, and you're thinking about them all the time in devotion. And also this sort of not well-known book by Saint Ignatius Loyola called Spiritual Exercises, which is basically a book about prayer, but utilizing your heart muscles to really love God, if you will,
Mm.
and Crowley recommends doing this, these rituals all the time. Basically, practice dedicating every waking hour to the deity that you're invoking, and and constantly using your imagination to do so, and do this until you kind of like feel like a real manifestation of this god or goddess or deity. Maybe you're doing an invocation of Ishu, the one of the
Mhm.
seven powers of Africa, one of the Orishas in Yoruba.
Right.
And Ishu is the Orisha of like tricksterism and gambling, but he or she is the doorway to the heavens, and you're
Mhm.
doing this, and maybe you're at a 7-Eleven, and behind you hear a voice asking you if you're going to buy that scratch off lotto ticket, and then that person disappears, and these sorts of things. And this is when you're getting into this kind of magical imaginal realm, where this is where synchronicity is more significant than ever before, because a synchronicity is a personal sort of meaningful charge that really is only meant for you.
Mhm.
That's why, like, telling people about your dreams and then talking about dreams is not as, they're not getting the same kick out of you telling your dream as them listening to your dream. It's kind of the same with magical experiences, maybe. That's why you keep a journal, and so Crowley recommends sort of doing this, like invoking these gods and goddesses, deities, until you get this real manifestation of them, and then stop immediately, and then move on to another god or goddess. And Wilson did that with Noosh, I believe, and then he did it with the Lady of Guadalupe when he was living in Mexico, uh,
Mhm.
when he moved down there in 1971, and that's when he says that he entered the Chapel Perilous, was on a spring day in 1971 in Mexico, reading from Crowley's Book of Lies, reading the secret message of the Book of Lies. But he was already sort of on this path, prepping the way, right? But he felt somehow that opened the door. And he, eventually in 1973, Bob has what he believes is this kind of knowledge and conversation with this holy guardian angel. On what It's kind of like this combination date between June 6th, 1973. He has this huge sort of shamanic magical experience from doing LSD in a darkened room,
Mm.
listening to John C. Lilly Beliefs Unlimited tape, and then an Aleister Crowley ritual for contacting your holy guardian angel. What I believe it was Israel Regardie reading Crowley's ritual, the Bornless One ritual, which I'm not sure if that comes from Crowley himself. This is but so Wilson's listening to these tapes, and of course, Beliefs Unlimited is an interesting sort of contemplation of John C. Lilly and his very calm voice, K'd out voice, ketamine voice, uh, telling the reader the truth, what he discovered, that in the province of the mind there are no limits. What
Mhm.
one believes to be true either is true or becomes true according to one's limits. So we must, in the province of the mind, constantly push ourselves to transcend our limits. But in the province of the body, there are definitely limits. And Lily found that out the hard way. But Wilson, listening to this tape, along with that Bornless One ritual tape and the LSD, set Wilson's trip off on a like sort of like a walk through his personal evolution, where he had like a flurry of past life memories, and he worked his way down the tree of life to where he was like a single-celled amoeba, and then that exploded into like union with godheads, and then symbols that coincided, like a lion head, that kind of coincided with what Crowley said one would see during
Mhm.
certain rituals. So for him, this sort of confirmed that he had a powerful magical thelemic experience. Other magicians will tell you that, people who practice thelema, they'll say like, yeah, I did these exercises, and Crowley says you will see this, and I saw that. And
Mm.
so it's kind of interesting how that might work. But that was on June 6, 1963. And this was, Wilson writes about it in Cosmic Trigger Volume 1. I mean, this was a life-changing sort of experience for him. And for the next 6 weeks, he's sort of walking on cloud 9. He's like feeling great, feeling groovy, as they said back in the day, dude, and whistling. And then he does it again, the same experiment on July 22nd, 1973, minus the LSD. And in place of that, he does like a tantra ritual with his wife Arlen. And then, as he writes, he goes to bed sort of not feeling like that a mission wasn't completed or whatever. And then he wakes up the next day from a dream, and with a voice in his head just telling him Sirius is very important. He goes to his bookshelf, takes down a book from Kenneth Grant. I believe it's the book The Magical Revival that came out around that time. And Kenneth Grant is like the thelemic writer that talks about Sirius, and even says that Aleister Crowley was referencing Sirius. So for Bob, this was like a huge sort of revelatory experience, and this sets him along, sort of the fifth gear of his journey, then, with this idea of knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. And Crowley says like one must do this first along one's magical path. So that's one other reason why Cosmic Trigger Volume 1 is such an interesting book, because not only is Bob discussing all these other interesting ideas, he's giving you his memoir of his own experience with this kind of Crowleyan curriculum of consciousness exploration. And it's pretty cool.
That is very cool indeed. Very cool. Yeah, it's so interesting how, although in the 60s, Crowley was seen kind of more of a counterculture figure, it's almost like he had, there was an occult revival in the early 70s. Again, you had, Jimmy Page and David Bowie and Ra and Kenneth Grant. I mean, people are actually practicing this stuff and really embrace it now that the kind of the mystic eastern part of the 60s was dying down, because again, the 60s, it didn't end well for the 60s, if you know what I mean, especially when it's represented or symbolized with the Altamont Festival and of course the Charles Manson situation. You know what I mean? It was like the shadow side of the 60s, the
Yeah, and
drugs, the
disco.
violence.
Ended with disco. What could be more horrible?
Hey man, disco never died. Disco lives.
No, it was already dead. It was undead to begin with.
But so my next question would be, Gabriel, some people have said, well, Wilson was never, he was just a writer and he was kind of cosplaying this stuff and all that. But you would say this example and others that we could say with confidence that he was a bona fide mystic throughout his life.
Sure. I mean, I think that's one of the notions that have also, the idea of what is a mystic has been kind of critically
It's
analyzed pretty well in recent years. He's part of one of those people who do that, but I mean, but for
Small
sure,
M
man,
mystic, maybe.
small and mystic. I like the way you
Yeah.
put that. Yes, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I don't mean to disparage his accomplishments and his studies
Yeah.
and so forth, because that was his path, but I don't think he was into the oneness part of it that much. He was.
Well, I like the way he put it. He called himself an agnostic Gnostic. So, like he did explore this notion of the one, especially in this book, The New Inquisition. He does a very nice way of breaking down these sort of cosmological perspectives.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what was his position on it? Did he have the personal experience of it, or was he just a student of it, or he encountered it?
Well, it's sort of like that oneness
Yeah.
feeling with everything. Of course, yeah. I mean, I think that comes up just during an acid trip, but sometimes you
Yeah.
feel that. But like walking with this, that we are, one organ of the same, wait, of the same organism or something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Wilson, for me, he does speak to my thirst for this idea of magic and mysticism. So, but a small m is fine. I mean, but I don't think he went around like giving out an index, a business card, being like, "I'm a mystic." That's why he's
no,
a
no.
trickster.
I can see your aura, baby. What's the sign?
you know.
Well,
Um,
well, I had kind of a interesting relationship because at the time I saw him in person, I had my quote unquote grand mal mystic experience when I was, in college. And so this is years afterwards. And afterwards I read his books and so forth. And I was very interested in what I call the small M mystic phenomenon, like magic and everything. But I never ever got the impression from his books that I read, Prometheus Rising and Cosmic Trigger, and the Illuminati trilogy, and from him in person, I never got the impression of a person that that had experienced that that really had the knowledge of, I mean, when this happens to you, you have a knowledge of the nature of consciousness, and that there's really not a whole bunch of different separate consciousnesses batting around. There's like one that projects itself into us all, and I
right.
never got that from him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because he explores this sort of idea of like what that eighth circuit model of intelligence. Well, if we go back to, well, say in Prometheus Rising, like Bob does talk about Jung, and when you see the diagram, when he breaks it down into four quadrants, there is a unified center, right? And my take from reading him really is like, how do you live within that center? Like, John C. Lilly said, the center of the cyclone, but within yourself is the all. Like you
Yeah,
are a representation of like the whole of nature. And personally, I definitely get that from Bob. um uh
interesting.
yeah, it's because it's, well, what I like about Wilson, I think maybe it coincides with a certain personality type, in the sense that I think Wilson, he never really said it, but if we look at him in a religious studies sort of way, he's really representing like a negative theology, right? In the sense of not like bad theology, but in Christianity, for instance, there were two approaches, right? And the apathetic, and I'm kind of butchering that. Like, one is the positive theology, negative theology. Basically, positive is affirming, like, I am, God is this, God is
Right.
that. Negative theology is God is too big, too grand, too huge to say
Oh,
anything
I
about
see.
it that even speaks about it truthfully. So when you speak, you're not doing it proper justice. And Wilson kind of borrowed from Crowley when he said, like, the universe is like subtracting the universe from itself. Like, there's this endless eternal notion to all of this, but to even like seek to put a word to these things, to describe these things, is almost like idolatry. And Wilson is an iconoclast, right? This is if someone wants to describe Bob in a religious kind of Christian way. I think one can, really, because he's hip. Hip is all about the notion of like, these words, the sign and the signifier, don't matter. It's about the rhythm and the movement. So all this talk about what God is this and God is that, and the unification of this and that, it's like one cannot, as W.B. Yeats said, speak about the truth. One can only embody the truth.
Right.
But
Yeah,
you had an
apathetic.
experience with
Yeah.
Bob, that was like, this guy, who is this guy? But maybe that's all part of this whole thing, man. I mean, who I was Bob, I can't say, man. All I know is, you can look at some people who are not uh they put themselves on a certain spiritual pedestal, like priests and gurus, and it's easy to be like, yeah, well, you're off on this and off on that. That's take breaking things down. But Wilson is already trying not to represent himself like that. But some people might get some real spiritual lessons from reading Bob, although he'll never want to be seen as like a
Oh,
deity.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's there are people that can say all sorts of things and have had different experiences and have studied things that, and then when you listen to them, that will, inside yourself, you resonate and you get things from it. But then the question is, is that person speaking from experience or just from scholastic, scholastic point of view? From a mental point of view as opposed to spiritual point of view. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what I liked about reading from Wilson was him providing a certain workbook in these matters of, his constant recommendation, like in Prometheus Rising, he's like, don't just read this book, do these exercises, like the
Right.
importance of distilling this nature, or like how actors will train, they an acting teacher might say, well, you're just only coming from the top of your head, you have to distill it within your body for this to be a full
Yeah.
thing. It's the same with magic, you have to work these things through your body, you know
Mhm.
you can't be an armchair magician, you have to, you know
Gotta do the work. Gotta do, yeah, and even beyond that, again, for the audience, check out our first interview. If you're on YouTube, I'm sure it'll get recommended. If you're on Patreon or my website or even on Apple, just put it on the search. I do it all the time with other podcasts. Um, and we go more on a historical basis, linear. But even in that one, based on your book, Gabriel, we talked about when he was brokenhearted and questioning his life, and he wanted to, end it, and he had this powerful vision, this feeling go through him. I would consider that mystic. There's also, isn't that part with the Ouija board, Ouija, yeah, you can say apophetic and I can say Ouija board, so I guess
right.
we're even on this, one. But he was able to like predict things about World War II and other things. I mean, there's many of these, say, mystic supernatural abilities and visions that he had throughout his life. I mean, dreams, if dreams are prophetic, we talked that, I would say that's mystic too. We are all mystics, it's about tapping it, but I think it seems he lived a very mystical life.
Yeah, I mean, I think with what Bob was trying to do was to recontextualize these metaphors, the jargon of what was considered magical,
Right.
and then therefore not rational, as in things that are a causal or non-causal thing. An event that happens that is not seemingly caused by A or B, which, in a reasonable universe, this is how things function. That's
Right.
physics, you know, and and he was seeking to find like principles of, emergent principles of psychology and neuroscience to explain things like ESP, uh, even maybe, aspects that would be considered mystical in the past, maybe, like they said Rasputin could read people's minds or something, right? And
Right.
he was a great feared Russian mystic of the czars. And so I think that that's why he's interesting, is that he's drawing a historical context, even like, Wilson writes about where the split between religion and mysticism began, with around the 1750s, right? Like, or this kind of, the scientific revolution,
Hmm.
became an immediate opposition to the church. And within the church, there used to be all these interesting areas for mystical, conversation, perhaps. And but then, since the Enlightenment, this hardcore split between science and religion, if you will. And,
Hmm.
I think Wilson is seeking to like take all of these metaphors and just rewrite some things, bring the conversation forward, because he was finding within 20th century science, especially quantum physics, now you had certain scientific, possible theories for these mystical, magical states. And he's seeking to synthesize all this stuff. Another reason why Cosmic Trigger Volume 1 is so great, because he's not just writing about his magical experiences, he's then trying to make sense of this stuff through the very cutting edge theories in quantum mechanics at the time.
Hmm.
You know, um, he yeah, he's the first one to get it right, as Saul Paul Sarag says in print, the first popular writer to, correctly talk about the experiments of John Clauser and Elaine Aspect that 50 years later, they got the Nobel Prize in physics for, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. What is a magical life too? I mean, he saw UFOs.
Yeah,
Like
you're right.
first UFO he saw when he was 18, right? And then his family, all his kids saw UFOs, right? And I came across this somewhere, some factoid, perhaps some anecdotal research that
Join Patreon AB Prime or Red Circle and get the full episode and podcast summary and other cool bonuses. Clean episodes on a private RSS feed, exclusive stream shows early and no more commercials. Support Aeon Byte.